The solo life is all about hitting the reset button. It's about choosing solitude over dysfunction. It's about prioritizing your peace over confusion. And it's about realizing that you have a duty to yourself to live a life of more intentional decisions and less incidental ones. So let me dive into the 5 codes that I personally live by and the things that I definitely keep in mind whenever I'm approaching things throughout life. So number 1, I'm always prioritizing autonomy and freedom. So let's start with autonomy. And that's my biggest essential, man, first and foremost. It's what encapsulates everything I do. If something restricts me, puts a cap on my potential, or limits what I can do or where I can go, I want no part of it. This is probably the biggest reason I've embraced a solo life. Relationships, especially long-term ones, are mostly restrictive and it can hold me back from the ideal life I want to live. Something like me being able to get up at 3 a.m. and go wherever I want to. If I want to meet interesting women or meet another interesting woman, I can do that too and simply enjoy the moment and the time. If I want to make a big purchase, I can do it without running it by anybody or feeling like I'm backdooring them. Just having that peace of mind and the freedom that comes with doing my own thing is priceless, and it's something I truly love. The second thing is, I don't have to deal with any unnecessary long-term commitments. And I've always said one of the greatest superpowers you can have in life is the ability to walk away. Once you give that up, your life is no longer in your hands. Commit, commit, commit. That's what everybody says, but commit to what though? That job, that girl, that hobby? What is the purpose of your commitment? And mainly there's 3 different definitions of commitment. There's the first one, which is the state or quality of being dedicated to something. The second one is making a promise or a firm decision to do something. The third one is an engagement or an obligation that restricts your movement. Now, that one is interesting. You see, I wanted to point out that last definition especially, because long-term commitment is not something that should be given away easily. It should be something that you really, really think about, because if you don't, it won't just go away. It's going to affect you long-term. Everybody wants to rush to go to school, rush to a major, rush to get into relationships, rush to buying a house, rush to having kids, rush to get married. Then after they do all of that, they want to ask themselves, is this really what I want to do? Like, what do you mean? And this is why I feel like a lot of people have these personal crises throughout their life. They do a bunch of things and rush to all these different destinations and life script goals that society has given them. And it's not necessarily something that they thought about or something that they really wanted to do. It was something they felt either pressure to do or was something that they thought they should have just been doing anyways. And what happens is they end up not being able to live the type of life that they personally wanted to. And that's why I adopted a personal rule for myself, which is no long-term commitments by default. It has to be worth it. It just seems as though everything society promotes is to get you to make long-term decisions very, very quickly before you realize what you've done. And we almost live in a society nowadays where you're better off not committing right away. You're better off thinking about things in terms of short term. And the worst way to live your life is with the mentality of, man, it just happened to me. I like to do things that make sense. If it requires sacrifices, it has to be worth it. A lot of people just want to be committed to something because it gives them a false sense of security. The next thing I focus on is not giving myself any labels. Never box yourself in. The rule of no labels is really about being able to pivot. Whenever I had a new skill or an interest in mind, I've always been able to kind of turn and, see what I can do over there or see how I can excel in a different area. There's so many positive experiences I've accumulated in life that I wouldn't have had if I just limited myself to what other people say is possible. Sometimes you ruin your own potential by walking past doors that you could have just opened. Another big component of no labels is that I don't allow other people to define me because I know myself better than anyone. And obviously I can't control how or what people think, but I can control what I choose to participate in. Ultimately, everything is subject to change. I change my mind, my interests, my skills, and usually labels can either complicate things or oversimplify them. The next big thing for me is no unnecessary financial entanglements. A fool and his money will soon part. And I know this very well because when I was younger, I blew my money on everything. I thought spending money as soon as I touched my hands was the way to go. So much so that I spent it on girls or clothes or shoes, electronics, everything. But hey, I guess that's a learning experience, right? Because at the very least, I was able to recover from it. Now, the reason why I'm very careful about financially entangling myself in things is because the idea of like co-signing anything or cohabitating or Doing anything that involves somebody else tying up my money does not sit well with me. Because one of the biggest reasons you don't want to financially entangle yourself with people is really because when you want to leave, you really can't no more. If you're cohabitating with somebody, right? If you want to break up with a chick, you can't really break up with her. Otherwise, you're going to break the lease. You're going to mess up your credit or your renting history or whatever. If you co-sign a car with somebody, like if they just stop paying it, then you're screwed pretty much. It's just a lot of ways you can go with that. One of my biggest hard rules is that I'm not putting my name on anything with anybody. And this also goes deeper when I talk about topics like marriage, which I'll cover in a different video. But the idea of marriage and legally binding myself to somebody on multiple levels, especially financially, seems incredibly untenable. It's not a chance I would do it, but to each their own. But yeah, man, like just the simple idea of avoiding things that can limit your immediate spending ability and, just leads you to not having control over your own finances just doesn't seem right to me. And look, man, there's strength in solitude, there's power in peace, and there's purpose in finding your frequency. I value my personal space more than anything, and I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my 20s is the fact that being alone is not a bad thing. I think you always hear people just glorify being in relationships, or they're always having somebody or always doing something with somebody, when in reality, they're not telling you the full story. And there seems to be this negative connotation with people who try to do things on their own or are comfortable being by themselves. It's like people try to project their own shortcomings about being single or being in solitude on you. It's like, oh, because you're single or whatever, you must be lonely or you're struggling or you're unhappy. Like, it's not the case. When the actual reality is, a lot of people don't know how to be self-sufficient and they don't know how to be comfortable by themselves. A lot of people just don't have any clue on how to enjoy all the aspects of life without having somebody else standing next to them. The person they're with can be a big pain in the ass, but they don't really care as long as they got somebody. They don't care if they got struggle love because they got somebody. They don't care if they're arguing all the time because they got somebody. Me, I'm not like that. I've always spent so many of my years being by myself and just enjoying life in a way I find unique. And ultimately, you got to have conviction in the way you live anyway. You can't try to please everybody. Just be yourself. So ultimately, who is the solo life for? I think the solo life is built for certain individuals. Those who want to grow without the pressure of dependency on other people or dependency on a partner or a spouse, things like that. Those who want to live a life based on their passions and their purposes and the things they're dedicated to. Those who don't want to tie their strength and their worth to the people who like them or dislike them. Those who want to prioritize people, places, and things that are low maintenance and that vibe with them. And finally, the solo life is for people who can properly assess cost and benefit and apply it to their life. To sum everything up, I think that you have to draw lines with who and what you allow access into your life, because if you don't do that, you'll let anything in. And personally, I have these rules for myself for a reason, and I don't just change them haphazardly. I never want to reach a point in my life where I'm sitting there thinking, how did I get here? Knowing that I wouldn't be able to go back. Being trapped is the worst feeling, so that's why I always focus on things that keep me free, physically, mentally, and in just whatever way possible. Alright, so if you made it this far, appreciate you for watching. Down below will be links to my newsletter and also my socials if you want to follow me at Monoqor. If you liked this video, then like this video. And as always, subscribe for more.